Excuse me. How unprofessional. Can you hear that? It's randomly playing in a room down the hallway. Kind of like the vibe. I think I'm just going to let it roll. Welcome back. You're at Ground Zero Salem with your host Pat once again. It's 2022 wrap-up time, which means I have a pile of about 20 releases that I'm going to talk about as some of my favorites of the year. I know it's a cop-out to do no particular order, but it's also arbitrary. You know, they're in a very scientific, important, well-researched order, that being the order that I randomly grabbed them from a pile. I don't know. I didn't feel like putting too much thought into this. I do have like a solid top 10 that I'm going to split into 2 streams that I'm going to be appearing on. Hopefully, if everything works out, I'll be on the Analog Attack stream on the 30th, 9 p.m. Eastern, if I'm correct, with Brian from Drop Dead and Nate Wilson, as well as Mike, the host. So I'm really excited about that. That should be cool. Keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll announce it on social media and everything when I have the definite details nailed down, but I believe it'll be 9 o'clock on the 30th. Also, right after that, if I can do it, it looks like the boys over at Heavy Metallurgy, Marty and Alan, are going to be doing a big crazy roundup of like 8 people at a time on a stream talking about their end of list picks, 5 each as well, I think. So what I think I'm going to do is do my top 5 like punk and hardcore releases on Analog Attack, and then I'll do my top 5 metal on Metallurgy. That is my plan. We'll see if that doesn't get screwed up or something doesn't happen. Should be cool though. If not, I'll just do my own thing later if a wrench gets thrown in the gears one way or another. But right now I just want to talk about some other picks. These are ones that kind of fell by the wayside, weren't quite in that top 10, but are still awesome, that I still listen to a lot. There's a few that are kind of disqualified because I've just gotten my hands on them in the past like couple of weeks. Haven't really absorbed them, so they didn't really work their way into the rankings of the top 10. Certainly all very worthwhile releases in these 20 or so random grabs. We'll start with something I don't think I've talked about on any updates yet, although I'm sure plenty of people have discussed it. It's the new Molder, Engrossed in Decay. Chicago band. A lot of people are nuts over. Their earlier releases I thought were decent, but nothing really blew me away. This did blow me away. It's great. Just the flavor of the week for death metal has been this sort of autopsy, knuckle scraping, worship kind of stuff. Molder does this exceptionally well. Not just aping autopsy. There's a lot of like 80s death metal rawness to it and a certain kind of punky vibe that I mean obviously that's a thing that autopsy has as well, this kind of primal caveman deceitfully simple drumming that's just really well executed. They have all that, but there's a certain youthfulness to it that feels a bit different, feels a bit modern with Molder. I'd say Impetigo's in there as well. You know, death, scream, bloody gore, but that's kind of a gimme with the whole autopsy thing. Really good. Really good tape. Enjoyed that quite a bit. I think it's a big step up from their previous ones. This came out like first thing last year, so I've kind of forgotten about it. Inferna Kabbalah by Ectoplasma. I almost thought of it as a last year's release because I think it came out in January or February of 2022. Greek guys, I love everything they do. I pick up everything Ectoplasma comes out with. This isn't my favorite by them, but I think it's better than the last release or two that they've done. It's really catchy, grimy, proficient death metal stuff. It captures that kind of ancient feeling that they're going for pretty well. Like it. Real clean sounding drums on it, though, which is an interesting contrast to the rest of the music. Then we got the Ecstasis Paralyzing Impermanence cassette EP. As usual, Unspeakable Acts have like 4 or 5 releases that are some of my favorite of the year. This is no exception. Newer band, I believe from the Pacific Northwest. I may have that wrong. I really like this a lot. It sounds like death metal of old, but not like a specific type. I think I talked about that not too long ago. They capture a lot of that late 80s, early 90s Morgoth and bands like that. It's very European sounding. At times gets kind of Swedish as well. There's a fair amount of melody on it. Discernible vocals, not like growls, like more of a hollow lich kind of approach vocally. Very, very good. Very enjoyable. Then, again, I just got this. Just picked this up. Got it in the mail, rather, I think a couple of days ago. Listened to it on streaming a little bit, but I wanted to actually bump the tape in the kitchen on the jam box. This is the Dream Unending Song of Salvation album on cassette here. $20 spin. If you didn't know, it's a gentleman from Tomb Mold with DFJ from a ton of bands, including Summerlands and Innumerable Forms, many others, Magic Circle. And this is their foray into doom death stuff. They do it really well. There's a part on, I think, the first song that reminded me a lot of a Paradise Lost jam, and I'm sure that's not a mistake. But as well as it kind of captures that really expansive, almost funeral doom kind of vibe with just how long the songs are, the clean tones, the single note echoey parts with kind of against a backdrop of like really heavy guttural growls. Massive sounding, expansive, really good. Then Summerlands, Dreamkiller. This is amazing. I can't think of a better person to take Phil Swanson's place than Brendan Radigan, who's one of the best vocalists in metal right now, for my money. You know, this brings to mind a lot of not really doomy influences to me. A lot of early 80s American metal. Sabotage, and musically, vocally not really like Sabotage at all. Even Dokken, stuff like that. Stuff that was kind of bordering on progressive for its time. Queensryche, early Queensryche a little bit. It's just classically tempered metal. I'd say a strong early American style. I'm sure people could come up with some European influences or whatever, but the point of it is that it's just really well written. It's so catchy, so well written. I think this is Brendan's finest vocal performance yet. It's really good. All right, let's get into some CDs here. We got Nullification, Kingdoms to Hovel. I haven't really seen too many people mentioning this. It's on a smaller label, Personal Records, spans from the Philippines. It's just perfect. I'd say almost kind of Floridian sounding death metal. It's got sort of an early Morbid Angel, early Monstrosity kind of vibe to it. It's got adept technicality, but nothing too flashy. Nice and catchy, too. I think this deserves a lot more love. I haven't heard anybody talking about this, really. So, check it out. Listen to this a lot. Beginning of the year, I was playing a lot of Elden Ring. This is the latest Immolation, Acts of God. I think this is the best thing they've done in several albums as well. Not to say that the last couple were slouches by any stretch of the imagination, but this is really well done. They kind of brought back some hookiness and catchiness that I think Immolation had been missing for a while. Seems to just stick to you a lot better, stick to your ribs a lot better on this one, but it has all those token, like, off-kilter, extra dimensional riffs and portal opening squeals and all that kind of stuff that Immolation has been known for decades at this point. New High Command, Eclipse of the Dual Moons on Southern Lord. High Command I liked a lot, but I never really got too into on their past couple of releases. I think I have a reissue of their demo, which is really good. I don't own that first full length. My wife does, and I enjoy it. This seems like a big step forward in terms of progressing into longer songs, kind of forging their own identity. I always kind of relate them to a lot of that new wave of thrash that kind of comes from the hardcore scene. It has a certain sound, that sort of power trip kind of sound. This kind of veers away from that and goes in more of a traditional metal direction. Almost kind of gets a little black metal here and there with the vocal approach. Gets kind of shrieky. Yeah, a lot more like keeps you guessing kind of choices with the songwriting and the riffs. You know, goes in some interesting directions. There's some longer songs. Rip to Shreds. This is great. This new Rip to Shreds on Relapse is amazing. I think a lot of people were kind of concerned that they were going to pull a Relapse, like the production was going to be a certain way, and sometimes a lot of underground bands, when they signed to that label, kind of, I don't know if they changed their sound for one reason or another, but for whatever reason, sometimes the Relapse release is kind of disappointing from bands. Not the case with Rip to Shreds. This is incredibly catchy stuff, even though the HM2 revival shit is well-worn territory at this point. They take that tone and do something completely their own with it. It's a two-man project. Probably their best album yet. There's enough grind in there, and there's even like a doomy passage here and there. It's its own beast completely, and it's so well written and so fun to listen to. Then we've got Voivod Synchro Anarchy. You know, I'm not really too into latter-day Voivod stuff. I'm pretty much check out at around Angel Rat. I've checked out a few things here and there, like Phobos, which I, to be honest, wasn't really that impressed by. But this record's really good. They've just grown into their own sound as an older band, like, so well. Something about their sound just matures perfectly as they progress on, it seems like. That's what I'm gathering by this. I kind of want to backtrack the last couple of records when I get a chance, but I was really impressed with this. It almost feels kind of post-rock. Not post-rock, post-punk. It has a certain almost kind of weirdly gothy kind of feel to me, combined with like sci-fi prog and of course metal. But yeah, really well done. They were great live too. I was really happy to finally catch them over the summer. Another Unspeakable Acts release that I loved. This is Critical Defiance's No Life Forms. This carries on in the fine tradition of Rain and Blood and Legion by Deicide. It's very quick and to the point. I believe it's about half an hour long. Just brutal thrash from Chile, even better than their last one, which I really liked as well. It's not crossover, but it has that really kind of truncated energy that a lot of crossover thrash has. You know, great hoarse, like Southern American, South American kind of vocals, just spat out really, really good. It has a lot of vibes of like early 80s thrash. I feel like the first couple albums by any thrash band you can think of that still has a little bit of the traditional heavy metal and kind of bluesy kind of riffs sort of, but sped up like to 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's really, really great. Super good. Suppression, The Sorrow of Soul Through Flesh, another Unspeakable Acts one, featuring the very sick and talented bassist from Ripper from Chile. This is bordering more on almost death metal, but we're leaning into like Steve DiGiorgio territory with Death Human, Sadist, and stuff like that, where it's very, very, very technically adept, but very, very fast, kind of breaching that gap between thrash and death metal. Excellent. Enchantment, Cold Soul Embrace. Great return from this UK doom death band. The bulk of this material, from what I gathered, was actually written back in the mid-90s, and this was just never recorded. Perhaps it was demoed, but it was never officially released. It was written back then, at any rate, and it sounds straight out of that. It sounds like a perfect mid-90s doom death record. Spoken passages, a lot of like melancholy. Just for anybody who loves any of that Peaceville stuff, this is right up your alley. It's perfect for that. Besieged, Violence Beyond All Reason. I think this is the last of the Unspeakable Acts releases that I went gaga for this year. This is a Canadian band doing not quite worship of Beneath the Remains, but very close. It reminds me more of that particular Sepultura record than anything else. The vocals are a bit different, but musically, with those kind of labyrinthine riff arrangements, but still maintaining that accessibility and just keeping your attention, it does that very, very well. It's very good. Brutal thrash metal stuff, again, preaching the gap, almost death metal. Certainly for people who like Beneath the Remains, Sadists, all that kind of shit. All right, finally, we got some records here. Worm, Blue Nothing. I mean, it's not going to be a year-end list with me without mentioning Worm, and if I had more time with this, I'm sure it would probably be in my top 10. Unfortunately, I've just gotten my grubby paws on this. It's great. You know, I don't think I've spun it all the way through completely yet, to be honest. Unfortunately, I have not had the time. But from most of what I've listened to on it, it has the cornerstone Worm sound that we've grown to know and love, kind of taking disembowelment and some other influences and pushing it into the 21st century. What Phantom Slaughter expands upon a bunch with this is kind of bringing back a black metal influence that never really went away, but their earliest stuff was way more necro and way more black metal. This is kind of pushing this sort of black metal side of their personality into more of a symphonic kind of deal, kind of like Anthems to Welkin at Dusk, I think is what Brain Smasher said, and I'd say that's fairly appropriate. Like a lot more with the keys and everything like that. It's haunting and gorgeous, well written. Born, Drottningard Doudens. This is pretty much the only non-metal or hardcore release that I have, even though there is a little bit of, I'd say, an anarcho-punk vibe to this. Mostly post-punk, though. Really, really hard-hitting post-punk. I'd say it's pretty gothy. You know, you got some Susie and Joy Division kind of vibes with it, but it's a little bit more aggressive than that. And they're from Reykjavik, which is cool. You don't hear too much from that part of the world, at least not me. Yeah, it's got a certain very cold beauty to it that's excellent. Got Woodstock 99. Super Gremlin. This came out on Sorry State, local label to me, down here in North Carolina, in Raleigh. This is one of the more kind of original things I've heard in a while. It's hardcore, and it's very influenced by Poison ID. It sounds like very American hardcore, grimy, negative kind of hardcore, but mixed in with 80s college rock, which is a little bit outside of my field of expertise, so I can't say if it reminds me specifically of Superchunk or whoever, but there's kind of jangly non-hardcore parts to it that make it really interesting. It's a really cool band. Then C4 from Boston. I mean, this is great, just like bordering on crossover, dumb NYHC inspired stuff, kind of reminding me of NYC Mayhem and Straight Ahead more than anything else, but also the Breakdown 87 demo, some newer bands like Rampage, who were around like last decade or so. Just fun, stupid, like moshy, fast hardcore stuff with lots of great like boneheaded breakdowns and stuff like that. Rigorous Institution, Cain's Marsh. This is very, very heavily influenced by Amoebics. So now you can listen to stuff that sounds like this guilt-free. There's no Holocaust denial involved. This came out on Blackwater Records this year. Fucking awesome. I mean, it makes you want to meet up with a Axeman on the edge of a moor. It's got that strong, pummeling, dirgy, sludgy kind of thing that Amoebics did so well and is so hard to replicate. I'd say there's a little bit of like a raw black metal kind of influence going in there as well, maybe. Like maybe some Dark Throne or something a little bit tossed in there. Very full immersive sound. Those crazy kind of circular sounding drum patterns and everything. They do the Amoebics thing really, really well. It's super fun listen. Blackwater really knocked it out of the park this year. A lot of good releases. Another one being the Decomp LP, which came out around the same time as the previous. Condemned to Earth. And this is just great metallic, thrashy crust punk, bringing to mind SDS from Japan and Misery and bands like that. Super gloomy, but often very, very fast and ripping. Really great thrash metal riffs that are kind of like soaked in beer. You know, that classic kind of metallic crust way. You know, thrash riffs that are drunk. It's really, really good. Drummer's from Boston. He played in Mourn in their early lineups, and he was in a band called The Wild Hunt as well, who are all good bands with good stuff. That's about it. That's it for now. I'll be talking to you soon. Gonna still do that bootleg tape thing, but I figured I'd get the 2022 video out of the way. Yeah, sorry if this is a little low energy. I'm fucking tired. I did not get much sleep last night. Yeah, so have a good one. I'll be seeing everybody on the 30th. Take care.